Hey everybody, it's Josh, and as you guys know, I am not primarily a politics channel, but every once in a while I do discuss political issues. And given that it's the night after the midterms, this will be a good time to have a political discussion. So here we go. Now, there was supposed to be a red wave last night. The Republicans were supposed to sweep through the House, the Senate, and leave the Democrats left with basically just California, Oregon, Washington, and New York. That's kind of what everybody was expecting. And it didn't happen. Now, the Republicans are still going to win both the House and the Senate, but it wasn't the red wave that people expected. Now, there's two reasons for this. The first reason is I want to be careful how I speak on YouTube here because YouTube loves to censor people who question election results. But there's no doubt that there's some dishonesty going on behind the scenes with regard to how things are counted. And that's how the Democrats kept some of their seats. There's no doubt about that. But there's a bigger issue here, and that issue is this. There's also no doubt that there are plenty of Democrat victories from last night that were legit, even though they were predicted to lose their seats. So, how did the Democrats avoid a red wave? I know the answer to this one, and again, the dishonesty that I just talked about is definitely part of it. But there's another reason for this. Gen Z Democrats came out to vote, and Gen Z Republicans did not come out to vote. That's what happened. You know, everybody's talking on Twitter about Gen Z turnout being huge, and it was mostly for the Democrats, and that's true. But Gen Z isn't as left as the millennials were. So, if most of Gen Z would have shown up, it would have probably been a red wave. So, what happened? Gen Z Democrats got out to vote. Those in Gen Z who are not Democrats stayed home. And why is that? Well, here's why. I'm going to use the Wisconsin election as an example. Now, Democratic dirtbag Tony Evers beat Tim Michels in the race for the governor last night. And there's no dishonesty there from what I can tell. It was a fair and square victory. But younger Gen Zers who are on the more conservative side looked at this race and they said, you got Tony Evers, who has proven himself to be a tyrant, forced lockdowns, forced mask mandates, all that sort of stuff. But our only other choice is Tim Michels, who wants to put more law enforcement on the streets, create tougher laws for smaller crimes, build more prisons, so on and so forth. And so the young Gen Zers looked at that and they said, well, we've got a choice between a tyrant and our only option against this tyrant, Tony Evers, is a man who wants to put us in an essentially a police state, all while claiming to be a quote-unquote freedom-loving conservative. And I think this is indicative of what happened all across the country as far as where Democrats held on to their toss-up seats. Younger Gen Zers who lean conservative, they're smarter than the boomer conservatives. They don't want a police state. They don't want to turn into some sort of dictatorship where you're thrown into prison with child molesters and killers just because you stole some toothpaste from Walgreens. And this is what a lot of the Republicans were pushing. So a lot of Gen Zers who are on the conservative side of the coin looked at that and said, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. Neither of these choices are very good. And you know what? They're right. They're right. How does putting more police on the streets equate to freedom? What are we going to police our way to freedom now? Is that what we're doing here? You know, and the Republicans like to talk about the Democrats being soft on crime and this and that. But it's a false thing. It's not true. I mean, the last time I checked, nobody's getting 60 days in jail for a drive-by shooting, okay? If you do something serious, you're going to get some serious time unless you happen to have the money to afford a good lawyer. What the Republicans want to do is make soft crimes more punishable. They want to give longer sentences to people who commit soft crimes, and that's unfair. That's not justice. And Gen Z conservatives see right through that, and they don't want it because they're not like the baby boomer conservatives that are all about this stupid law and order crap. Okay? Now, okay, so that's the first reason why Gen Z conservatives stayed home and basically let the Democrats win a lot of these races. Here's another reason why, and I know a lot of people like myself who are on the more conservative side of the coin don't want to hear this, but the Roe versus Wade thing made a lot of Gen Z conservatives stay home. Who's the most sexually active people in any generation? It's the 18 to 25-year-olds. They're the ones who are in college. They're the ones who are experimenting the most sexually. They're the ones who are going to parties and having the most sex and all that sort of stuff. So they're the ones who are going to be the most affected by the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And so when Roe versus Wade was overturned, a lot of Gen Z kids who would normally vote conservative decided to stay home again because they felt like they didn't really have a good choice of candidates. The Democrats are obviously tyrants, but the conservatives are tyrants too. They just pretend not to be. And again, the younger Gen Z conservatives are right about this. I've long said that the conservative obsession with abortion is going to be our downfall, and that's what happened in these midterms. No matter how you feel about abortion, the government has no business regulating your pregnancy. I mean, there's nothing more personal and private than pregnancy. And if you give the government power to regulate what you can and cannot do to your pregnancy, you're giving the government basically unlimited power over your life, because something like that, sorry, a lawnmower went by my apartment, but something like that can be used as a precedent to create all kinds of invasive and unconstitutional laws. Because not only have you invited the government in your home in that situation, you've invited the government into your body. You know, just like the Democrats were trying to do with the forced vaccine mandates. So a lot of these younger Gen Zers who might have conservative values, they know they're sleeping with a different woman every week, right? Or if they're a woman, they know they're sleeping with a different man every weekend. They know pregnancy is possible, so they're not trying to vote for somebody who's going to take away their right to an abortion. So they won't vote for the left, they won't vote for the Democrats, but they're just going to sit this one out. Sorry, I don't know why they're cutting grass at this time, but they are. Anyway, and I don't blame them. Roe versus Wade should never have been overturned. It's one of the main things that prevented a red wave from happening this election cycle. But it's also just the fact that the government does not belong in your business like that. I don't see how conservatives who are so anti-government, so pro-freedom, pro pull your bootstraps up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, pro keep government out of their lives, forget about all of that when it comes to abortion. They toss all of that to the side when it comes to abortion. I don't like abortion, but I'm consistent in my conservative principles, and I understand that just like it's dangerous to allow government to force vaccines on you, it's also dangerous to allow government to regulate your pregnancy decisions for you. Keep government out of our personal, private, and medical decisions. Irregardless of how you feel about abortion or whether you feel abortion is murder or whatever, we have no right to impose that on others. And believe it or not, most conservatives, younger conservatives anyway, feel the same way. If you don't believe me, look what just happened in Kansas and Kentucky last night. Both voters in both states defeated measures to ban and restrict abortion. And I mean, it doesn't get more conservative than Kansas. The only place more conservative than Kansas is Oklahoma. Kansas has literally 2 counties that vote blue, and they generally only vote blue by a small margin, and the rest of it is all red. And Oklahoma is the only state in the whole union where literally every county in Oklahoma votes red the whole time. So Kansas is likely the second or third most conservative state in the entire union. And even Kansas voters don't want a ban on abortion. They don't want their abortion rights limited really at all before the second trimester. So what does that tell you? When you've got a bunch of conservative candidates out there saying we must ban abortion, stop abortion, and when in reality most conservatives, especially younger conservatives, are pro-choice, whether they admit it publicly or not, what's going to happen is a lot of the people that would have normally voted for you as a conservative candidate are just going to stay home. So, and again, back to like the soft on crime thing, I think younger conservatives too, younger Gen Z conservatives, realize that this whole tough on crime, law and order stuff is total BS. We do have to address the underlying issues that lead people to live a life of crime, and poverty has a lot to do with it. Now, the BLM crowd and the Antifa crowd might overplay the racism aspect of it, but even without racism, like let's say nobody in America was racist, poverty and lack of opportunity still leads to crime. Nobody wakes up, when you're 5 years old, no 5-year-old kid dreams about being a drug dealer or a criminal when they grow up. Okay, there's reasons people get into these things, and they get into a criminal lifestyle because they don't feel like they have an opportunity to do anything else. Now, there are a handful of people who get into the criminal lifestyle just because they like doing it, But think about it. How many suburban kids are out there doing drive-by shootings? How many suburban kids are out there robbing people for whatever's in their wallet? There's a few, but most of those are like wannabe gangsters anyway. They saw a rap video on TV and they thought they would go out and quote unquote do something gangster. But I mean, as far as people who are what's quote unquote career criminals, there's reasons that people go down that path. And we have to address those reasons. We can't just blow these people off as like they're born criminals and that's all they're worth. So we got to figure out a way to lock all these people up for life or whatever. That's nonsense. All right? Because if it were true, there'd be just as much crime in the middle class and upper class neighborhoods as there are in poor neighborhoods. So we got to address these underlying issues, even if it's not a race thing, even if it's something else. And I believe racism plays a role, but I don't believe that it's as much of a role as like the Black Lives Matter crowd makes it out to be. But still, there's the poverty issues, and there's so many different things that come with poverty that leads one into a life of crime. You know what I'm saying? People do become products of their environment. Not that they shouldn't be held accountable for their own personal actions. But there shouldn't be overkill with holding them accountable. The punishment should fit the crime. Locking people up for stealing some crap from Walmart, and giving them a cell where they're celled up with a guy that, just raped like 20 women. That's not cool. That's not fair. That's not justice. And the reason I'm saying all this is because younger Gen Zers who are conservative realize this. And they look at the conservative candidates out there who are basically pandering to the boomers with their law and order bullshit, and they don't want nothing to do with it. And I agree with them, and I don't blame them. So, anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent here. I got to get going in a while, but that's why Everything I just said here is why the red wave did not happen last night. Any denial of this is you're just telling yourself that, just denying reality. Okay, so that's that. We got to stop letting the boomers control conservatives, and we got to stop letting the boomers put their version of a conservative candidate up there. I don't want some John Wayne Law and Order goofball who's obsessed with ending abortion. I want somebody who's focused on defending our constitutional freedoms, the freedoms guaranteed us in the Bill of Rights, no matter what. That's what I want. And I think that's what a lot of young Generation Z conservatives want too. And for the most part, they didn't have that option in this election, so they just stayed home. I don't blame them. Cash App links down below. Please show your love. Talk to you guys soon.